Hello, and welcome to another episode of Funny Philosophies, where today I'll be talking on a somewhat controversial subject, given that I am a white, middle-class British male. Dun dun dun! But today I'm going to be talking about feminism. The movement of women's liberation, suffrage, etc. etc. So I'm going to be talking about different forms it's taken historically, contemporary forms of the philosophy. Someone's playing drums, and a few thinkers, intellectuals, ideas within the movement, and give some personal shit as well. So give some personal perspective, and obviously hands up in the air. I am white. I have a penis. And I'm a man, so I am dripping with privilege from every orifice. Farting privilege all over the shop. So, but I'm still out of opinions, so deal with it, mother. Right, let's get on with it. Feminism, what is it? Feminism is essentially a philosophy or a idea, which it's really hard to argue with in the actual ideal of it, which is the equality of women to men. Gender equality, essentially, is what it means. This has taken many forms. It's taken a form of, it had a kind of, obviously, a women's suffragette movement in the early 20th century, which was primarily about women having equal voting rights, so an equal voice in democratic societies, which had developed post-industrial revolution. I mean, this kind of is just taken as a given now, but obviously women had to die and fight for that. So, literally throwing themselves in front of horses just to get an equal say in the democratic running of society. So, yeah, you had the suffragettes movement, and, unless you're some kind of caveman, it's pretty hard to argue against that women should have equal stake in society in terms of voting and the democratic running of society. So there's that. Let's explore a few other things. Further on down the line, they had kind of the emergence of 60s and 70s feminism, which is much more about equality in the sphere of public life, work, and also tied in very much to the sexual revolution. So the 60s in general was a re-evaluation of values anyway, and feminism was part of that. So you had the emergence of women reassessing their role as mothers and the kind of traditional role of women in society up to that point. So much more about reevaluating a reassessment and a kind of coming out of the closet, as it were, of female sexuality, which is all for the positive, really. And we've reaped the benefits of that. Women more so, to be honest, in terms of their own having ownership of their own sexuality and their own agency over their sexuality. So Germaine Greer was quite pivotal in that, I believe. I've not read the Female Eunuch, but I know somewhat about the general overview of what it's about. It's basically, and I probably will butcher it here, so feel free to metaphorically slap me. It is about women taking ownership of their agency and becoming more independent. A lot to do with female sexuality, how that functions, and generally about becoming a kind of stronger woman model that could kind of level up to men, I suppose, essentially. So that happened in the 60s, 70s. Some other thinkers from there, I think Camille Paglia, did I correctly said that? Like, I'm a noob to all this shit, so I will get a load of shit wrong, so forgive me for that. And to be honest, let's just explore this a bit more from my own personal perspective. I struggle with some aspects. I'm just moving in the more contemporary realms of feminism. I guess it's current theory, really. I struggle with some parts of it, which I'll go into that in a second. But I'm not a natural feminist. If anything, I'm a extremely reluctant feminist, and I kind of wind a lot of feminists up all the time by questioning certain tenets which are regarded as sacrament and basically tenets that I can't argue with because of being aforementioned white-skinned, pale penis owner. Um, and that's kind of kind of frustration I still have with the ideology of it. And it is an ideology. I mean, everything's an ideology, really. It's some of the political philosophies, or it happens to be an ideology which pretty much 90 or 80% I agree with. But there is that, and I'm just covering the elephant. I'm covering the elephant in the room, not me. No joking, please, about my weight. God damn it! I don't have a trunk here. No jokes about my penis being a trunk as well. That's really silly and a bit ridiculous. Anyway, get on with this. Okay, so now we've got contemporary realms of more contemporary third wave feminism, I suppose. Now, I've missed obviously shitloads of stuff out, but I'm going to do this in 20 minutes, so you know, there's only a limited amount of time I can talk. So we've got third. Basically, what we're in now is second wave feminism. I suppose all that kind of 70s, kind of getting equal rights for men, and more kind of became also about getting equal place in the Second World War. Actually, we mentioned that. That was incredibly important for women's liberation, women's lib, and obviously it's pre when women's lib kind of like exploded, and the 50s were an incredible traditionalist conservative decade in general in the West, and all over really. But they were incredibly important in terms of men were all out fighting, you know, gashing each other and blowing each other up and shooting each other because of some cunt called Hitler, who was trying to impose his vision of this insane totalitarian artistic mental shithead vision onto the world. So we all went out there just like etc etc. But obviously we needed women back home making bombs, making tanks, making stuff that we could blow other people up with, and so they kind of took over a lot of the industrial and engineering roles that men traditionally had dominated, and women were always kind of seen as, that's not women's work, blah 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 bullshit. So that helped, gave a case really for women taking more ownership in the workplace and being given opportunities to even do that in the workplace. So because obviously you had this very kind of patriarchal view prior to this in the Second World War of, you know, women's place was in the home, women's places doing washing, women's places doing the ironing, women's places producing, being a baby making machine and just popping one out every 2 years. So thankfully the Second World War changed. That was one of the only positives basically from the Second World War, was increasing respect for the fact that women had an equality with men in terms of the workplace. Right, so there's that, cover that now. Contemporary third wave stuff. This is where I kind of part waves with some of it, because a lot of it is informed by postmodernism, which I kind of find a bit repugnant as a kind of idea of the world. I don't know yet what's going to replace postmodernism, but postmodernism in a lot of ways is very extremely relativistic. It kind of culturally, it says that there's no culture which can have. It's kind of like all cultures exactly the same in terms of their value. In terms of they're saying there's no intrinsic value to anything. So it's kind of the obvious end point of nihilism in a lot of ways, and some aspects of third wave feminism does kind of adhere, it seems, to this kind of idea of cultural relativism, which I'm not really a fan of. I don't really know what is the superior culture, but I know it definitely isn't some cultures which are propped up, I guess. Anyway, I'm rambling now. Let's get on to something. Third wave feminism. It's extremely prevalent on student campuses. It's extremely concerned with. It's more inclusive, which is a good part of it actually. So it's more concerned with kind of intersectional. Intersectionality is more about involving as many voices as possible of black, Asian minorities, etc., etc., different religious groups, LGBTQI, blah 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 blah, whatever it is. LGBTQI, I think now. Disabled voices, blah blah blah. So basically, including very inclusive kind of feminism, which is good. But it's got the inherent weaknesses of all intersectional kind of political theories and gender theories, I suppose, as well now, which is that it tries to include so many voices that there's no overarching philosophy of it, which is my real kind of. I think in a lot of ways, third wave feminism is confused as to what it actually stands for in some ways. So it becomes a lot more angry in some respects, which some aspects of 70s feminism was, in some respect, you had like the extreme end of that, which is an extreme, and I am saying it is an extreme, so don't try and say that I'm saying that it was the norm by any stretch of the imagination. Well, it wasn't. Scum Manifesto, which is almost made, I think, as a kind of jokey art piece, but it was made by a woman who shot Andy Warhol. I can't remember what the fuck her name is now. But that was basically just like, if you were going to have like a really shit stand-up comedian's cliched version of what feminism was in the 70s, it would be that, or just like kill all men, blah blah blah, all that bullshit, which is essentially just fucking bollocks, and it isn't what it's about. But yeah, there are some strains within it now which seem a bit like placing, instead of pursuing a kind of line of inquiry into how women can become fully independent in society, can have ownership of themselves, their bodies, their reproductive rights, which have been won more or less, but there are still battles. There was Northern Ireland. Ireland's still very dodgy with that. A lot of Catholic countries obviously dodgy reproductive rights as well, i.e. abortion. So you've got... where am I? Yeah, but then it's kind of... There's a lot of it. It's just that I kind of find issue with this kind of BuzzFeed-like kind of feminism, which is basically... But, you know, it's BuzzFeed, so how seriously you take a website that just basically mines other people's content and dilutes it down to the most basic of forms without any kind of real journalistic integrity or actual nuance. But with that said, a lot of it can just become a bit yawnsome, like kind of where it's going on about, you know, kind of snappy, like, ooh, I don't know, like what, let's think of an example. It kind of becomes a bit too much, you know, do it this way, don't do it that. I'm kind of ruining the metaphor now, but essentially it just becomes a bit, you know, just heaps a lot of the problems at men's feet, and it is essentially tabloid journalism in the virtual form, so I don't take it that seriously, but that kind of nonsense. And it's not. And there's obviously that not all men thing that goes around that I think a lot of feminists hate, which I probably do myself. But that's a valid point. You can't just generalise about an entire group of people by citing individual cases. I'd never do that about women. I wouldn't say, well, I have actually. Let me when I'm angry, when I'm pissed off, and I will generalise. It's what generalisation is usually is an emotional response to an event. So, for example, I have like been dumped before and gone, oh, fucking women, man, fucking bitches and shit. That's strong language, obviously. But I think to deny that men do that and to deny that women do that towards men as well is just a bit reductive and a bit silly, really. It doesn't really take into account the actual complexity of human life and the context of human life, like, and emotion and all the rest of it. Emotion is not something, you can't logically break emotion down. Emotion is just something that gets released, you know what I mean? So I mean the whole point of, and like, let's break this down to something that's a bit more useful now. The way feminism was good parts of it, the intersectionality, I think, which means that there's a lot of inclusiveness in the voices which are heard, so it's not just all you know, liberal kind of white women. What's this is good about it? I guess the inclusiveness, the further expanding research into how women's sexuality kind of works, I guess, because that's actually been not a very researched area. I think it's women that should probably do the research in that area. I think I mean, as much as I'd like to do research into female sexuality, it's not my place. Obviously I'm going to have a biased view and I'm going to be blah blah blah. Blah 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 blah. Other two things that piss me off about it: mansplaining, man interrupting, prefixing language with man in language. This is the kind of trend that's emerged in the last few years. I am constantly referred to as a mansplainer and a man interrupter and a man spreader. Again, it's a kind of reductive, trying to reduce something down into a cliche. So mansplaining basically is just a man talking patronisingly to a woman. And maybe I do this, but I think I do it to everybody, to be honest. I don't just do it to women. I do it to everyone. I do it to men. Well, I do it to everyone. I do it to my parents sometimes. I don't really knowingly do it. I think what it is basically if you're talking to someone about something that you're relatively knowledgeable about and you're trying to have a conversation with them, a two-way conversation, you might mention something and then explain what it is, conceptually or otherwise. You know, it's like, say for example, I was talking about front-end web development, for example. I might mention a framework that I've used to gain some kind of feedback as to whether they've used it, regardless, you know, whoever it is, man or woman. Have you used this framework? What did you think of it? That's having a conversation. It's not being patronising, it's having a conversation, it's creating a two-way dialogue. This is where I get kind of annoyed with it, and to suggest that women don't do that as well is almost laughable. I've worked in a lot of charities and first sector organisations, and the idea that women don't in their own way kind of talk down to men and kind of like belittle us in some ways is so absurd. I don't even know if I even have to mention how it happens, because it does happen. Like, I don't really give a shit, to be honest. I can take it. I think it's funny. I just like shrug it off. And you know, women, in a lot of ways, women can kill with words a lot more effectively than men. They can belittle a man to the point where he just feels like absolutely nothing, like a void, like a piece of shit on the floor. Men can, well, when men do it, it's generally, you know, they take it to much more of extreme levels, which, that's all my hand up for this one, actually. Women do get a bad hand in terms of violence against them. Let's not just not deny that shit. I mean, men are violent obviously towards each other, but they're also violent towards women, and for women it's a lot worse because you get rape and you get women being abused by men, which is fucking gross. But men do it because there's a lot of insecure men out there who are just got no brains and are fucking retarded, so they will just take it out on their woman, and they will become a possessiveness thing for them, where they actually they get power out of it. Well, rape obviously is about pure power. That's just disgusting, psychologically damaged men who have a need to get power from having, you know, assaulting women and like basically fucking them up for life as well. So I mean, that's gross, and there's a lot of important work, I suppose, in feminism to be done. That's another part of the third wave thing, which is good, is the drawing more attention to rape, but that's a mixed bag, I think. But obviously, how can I not be against people drawing more attention to that? Where it gets a bit dodgy is where you have cases of like a dude and a woman get drunk, they have sex, regretful sex, who's never been there, but then the morning after, a woman decides that that was rape. Sex is all about consent, obviously, or rape is always going to be about, has the woman consented to the sexual act taking place. Like, for example, if she says no, that's it, you've had your piece is done, get out of there, go home, feel a bit sad, drink a beer and go to bed. That's, for me, is how simple it is. That is it, that is consent covered. Where it gets dodgy is if you're both drunk and it gets a bit muddy and murky. I think most cases, unless the man's been extremely physically violent in basically, you know, kind of raping a woman, it's context specific is what I'm saying, and it's dodgy ground to get into with this. Where drunkenness issue with rape can be really obviously rape is where a girl's extremely drunk, a guy takes advantage of that and has sex with her. That, I think, is scummy. I think that's completely scummy. Well, the actual thing you're supposed to do is, as a gentleman, essentially, is the girl's drunk, even if she's hot, even if you've had prior shit, is like, take her home, put her to bed. If she's pissed out of her face and you're not, you've got a responsibility of care there, a duty of care, not to take advantage of that woman in that situation. Anyway, this has obviously drifted a lot into my own personal shit in terms of how I view feminism, and yeah, it's not something I always agree with, which can cause some conflict with feminists. And like I said, I'm kind of a reluctant feminist, essentially. I mean, most of my actual feminist values just return back to humanist values in a lot of ways. It doesn't mean that I kind of see feminism anyway as basically a subset of humanism in terms of the actual ideas of it. It's just about creating human values, respect, dignity, and cooperation. That's it, essentially. Equality is the major part of it, obviously, as well. So anyway, that's basically 20 minutes. So I await being called a cuck. I await being called misogynist. I await being called I await being assaulted by both camps of the extremes of feminism, mugto and all that fucking red pill bullshit. So I await with glee being assaulted by both ends of the gender war spectrum for being a moderate, imperfect feminist. Thank you.